Welcome to the Epiphany Series. Today we've got Dr. Paula Petry, who is the author of A Mother's Courage to Awaken, Hope and Inspiration from My Daughter's Journey in the Afterlife. It's a book which tells a story about the love and the loss of a child and the healing quest that it initiated. So welcome to the studio, Paula. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's wonderful to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Paula, can you just tell us a little bit about this journey that you've been on and the journey you went on with your daughter, Alexandra?
Absolutely. My book, my story begins in 1984. I was 30 years old, married. I was full of hope and innocence, really, high expectations of life. My husband had an overseas assignment, which was in the Dominican Republic, but it was this sense of a jet set life, the life that I grew up in, all of that kind of left behind. And it all came to a screeching halt with the birth of my daughter there in the DR. And it was harsh news because my daughter Alexandra was born with spina bifida, myelomeningocele, which meant that she had a paralysis from pretty much the waist down, a thoracic level paralysis. And so the news was harsh. The conditions there in the hospital were unexpectedly extremely harsh. And the decision was harsh because we were given the choice to bring Alex home with us from the hospital or not, and just leave her there in the hospital. It was clearly the most difficult decision. Seemingly it should have been like, of course, bring my daughter home, right? But we stumbled around a bit for that. And Joseph Campbell really captures that the best in when his wisdom of that you have to give up the life that you dreamed of, that you planned for, and accept the life that you've been given. And so in that, and it is like a hero's journey story in that we're called to adventure. That's the hero's journey. And the hero often refuses the call. And if the hero refuses the call, all bedlam, it's bedlam. And that's what it was. We were refusing that call, like thinking about it, right? And in terms of the care, Alex did 4 days go home with us, but our actions weren't immediate. If they would have been immediately full force, we would have been on a plane home. But it was that stumbling around and accepting, what is. And so that's a lot of that beginning story that we can all identify with, is life giving us something very unexpected, and what do we do with it? And we made our way to Miami, and the story continues. And I moved out from the shadow of my husband. A lot of women identify with that, of finding my own voice, my own way, as I needed to for my daughter. And conditions were difficult in Miami for people with disabilities in the 80s and 90s. We had legislation by then. If you can imagine, it wasn't until the late 70s that children with disabilities really could enter public schools and had the right to do that. So we were right in the midst of all of that. And I had the opportunity to spearhead a parent-to-parent support organization, created a nonprofit, passed legislation. It was the lion within came out, and it was my own personal growth and development along the way. Yeah. And that's the very beginning of the story.
Yeah. Do you think, knowing what you know now, do you think that you almost had to reach that state of rock bottom? Because you talk a lot about how you were a victim early on in the book, and you were a victim of life and a victim of circumstance. Do you think you had to see that and feel that pain to then grow in the way you have and almost transform from victim to someone who now helps people?
We all do, that's where that's the death and resurrection. It is that story of death and resurrection, and we think of it as a biblical story that is about life after death, but it's not. It's about the death to the ego, the death to all of our addictions of who we are, who we've married, our titles, our degrees, our education, our status in society, all of that. It all, for me, 3 times really, there was a death and resurrection in my life, and it is part of that coming into knowing of who you really are and what's left after you lose everything that's valuable. It's that core essence, that divine self that's left. That's I am that I am self, that you come to embrace and know and feel that the sense of safety and security in life comes from knowing that. There were no one's safe. We're safe within. Safety is an inside job, I say. And so part of that death and resurrection process is finding then that place of safety within. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously Alexandra has played the lead role in your life. Even now, she's still there by your side. But why do you think she came into your life? And, she obviously arrived with disability, which was challenging for you as a young mother, which was challenging for your partner. And it was challenging for Alexandra, I'm sure, as well. Why do you think she now, knowing what you know now, why do you think she came into your life as she was to challenge you almost?
Right. I believe for that reason. I think my worldview now, not then of course, but is that we plan our lives before we come into this lifetime. We have um, what we want to transcend and grow and expand and do in general ways, right? Not the map, not the territory. And then we children come to us, and if they choose us and being their parent. And for us, it was a fit, because it was wanting to, I believe, be in this time, being the spiritual warriors that we become, and transcend in order to be able to help others and bring in this knowing into the world. And the journey to get there is challenging, because we have forgotten everything that we already knew before we came in, right? So the wisdom within about who we are has to be rediscovered. And the process of rediscovery is that shedding of self. So for just children with disabilities, spoken with thousands of parents, right? I formed a nonprofit and became a voice for my daughter and for many others in Miami and throughout the state, and did some national work as well. Everyone, it's an opening of the heart experience. And people will always, I'm a better person for this. I've never heard a parent say anything different. Yes, I wish it hadn't happened, or if it were different or easier, but I'm a better person. But they go together. All of those challenges go with becoming a better person. So I do feel coming in with a disability and a daughter who's extremely loving, open-hearted. She was a magnet for others, brought that to me.
Wow, wow, amazing words. Thank you. Um, I This is a hard question to ask, but it's so important to the story. I mean, the part of your book which first brought me to tears, there was about 3 times when I cried, but it was chapter 9. I think it's called When the House Fell Down or something like that. And you talk about when you looked into her unmoving eyes, and you realised that she'd gone, that she'd passed. But you didn't want to. Jamie kept saying, "No, no, no. It's. I think she's okay. I think she's okay." But and you were happy. You wanted to take his words, but I think you knew deep down that is every parent's, worst nightmare in many respects. I know it's part of your journey, but can you just tell us about like that feeling, and then more so, I want to hear about the courage that you then found to almost awaken, and go on a whole new journey with Alexandra with you in a different form almost.
Mm. Uh, it, you go into like an altered state, like the shock and the horror is uh, something takes over. And so Alex had come home. Alex was 12 years old and we had long prepared for a surgery that went awry. It wasn't meant to be. Um, and she went the day of the surgery. It was going to be to put in rods to strengthen her spinal column and to erect and strengthen it, and preparing for it with these tissue expanders that needed in order to create the skin to stretch when the back was closed. It was a complicated preparation, which was 9 months long, which you think of the value, the significance of 9 months of expanding the tissue, talking with doctors, expanding, talking, blah, blah, blah. And then it was 9 months. And the day of the surgery, Alex had 105 temperature. So it was not to happen. But we went into the hospital because these tissue expanders then needed to be removed. They had gotten infected. And in the hospital, she began to have headaches. It was the shunt malfunctioning, but they kept changing her position to adjust it and it seemed to release the headache. The CAT scan showed that possibly the shunt was malfunctioning. It's a tube that goes from the ventricles down and releases the fluid that cannot make its way down the spine properly. So all of that happened in 6 or 7 days in the hospital. And we went home. We went home with a good report. The shunt's working, it's fine. It was probably something that happened post-surgical. It was kind of a mystery thing. But going home was like always the best news. And my daughter really wanted to go home. But there were signs along the way, that things weren't right. And so we all went to bed that night. A friend had come down to assist with all of it, expecting things to be going as planned. And I had gotten up several times during the night, which I had forgotten about, to adjust Alex's bed, because now we had gotten a hospital bed and made sure she was comfortable. But during the night, she did have the signs of a malfunctioning shunt. And in the morning, my husband goes to work. They had sent us home with medication that was not appropriate. So we were tracking down, I was out tracking down the right antibiotic in a liquid form. And when I came home to give her medicine, then she was already passed, and had passed probably around 4 or 5 in the morning. And at that moment, it was that of shock, which you described, Peter, of oh my God, she's dead. And my son, I began to just run around the house like a crazy woman, with my son running after me. No, Mom, maybe she's sleeping. No, she's dead. No, maybe she's sleeping. It was like for a long time. like that. So then it was the way it was. And so the pediatrician arrived immediately, the coroner's office, because it was expected, it was necessary for an investigation when there's a child death at home. And part of my story, in for those listening who have children and grieving parents, is that, you know, the child is grieving. My son's grieving in a home with grieving parents, and what he witnessed, as we all do, we make up stories, you know. So as we know, there's facts, and then there's the story that we wrap around it. And so the facts for me was that I had slept through my daughter's death, and the amount of guilt that I was burdened with was extreme. And for my son, it was that someone had broken into the house in the middle of the night and had murdered my daughter. And that didn't come up. And for months, maybe a month or so later, when talking with him about his difficulty in sleeping, he shared with me how he would put himself to sleep, which was putting himself in his mind into what was like a coffin, but you know, it's not none of those terms, into like a plexiglass, a glass tube, and that the cover would come and close, protecting his back, because my daughter came home with wounds on her back, right? Because they had removed these tissue expanders. So the blood, the wounds, all of that got mixed up for him. And that I said, well, how would you breathe then? And he goes, no, because there's a tube that comes in. Kids, wonderful imagination, the value of imagination. No, because a tube comes in and I breathe through the tube. But the story is that it was like a coffin, and his back was protected, right? Because nobody was going to get him. And then I realized, I said, well, why, Jaime? He goes, well, I don't want anybody to murder me in the middle of the night, like they did Alex.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like with grief, we all need to talk.
Yeah.
Because things get stuck in there. We create these stories. So my story was that I slept. It's interesting. I had so many titles for my book, and my book ends up A Mother's Courage to Awaken. And my story when Alex died was that I slept, through her death.
I see.
So yeah, right. That was my story. Yeah.
Well, very well. Thank you. Firstly, it's probably the hardest thing you ever have to say, and I imagine it doesn't get any easier, no matter how deep you go and how much you deal with it, because the reality doesn't change. But one thing that obviously changed is your philosophy and the way you looked at it, almost the lens that you looked through. I love the part of the book when you talk about going to meet the medium, Bert, I think he's called.
Yeah.
And he said he'd been he was expecting you, but so was your daughter, because he already had her in the room next to him. And I thought that was so beautiful. Maybe I'm sure you could tell it better because you were there.
Yes, it was an exceptional experience for me, and part of it was because of the story I had invented, and I did a lot of work because I met Bert the 11 years on the anniversary of Alex's death, which was July 5th. And the burden of guilt had greatly resolved because I was in therapy at the time Alex died, and I kept going with that. But and the burden, in a way, Peter, was a gift. And that's a message I want to share with others, is that there was so much guilt that I knew that if I didn't work to resolve it, I wouldn't go on. I couldn't go on. So it was, I believe there's messages, particularly with a child, because it is karmic. Um, uh, the how that a child passes away, what is the gift left behind? And it was the gift of needing to resolve the burden of guilt. And I had carried guilt or this over responsibility for other people's actions from the time I was very young. It was a formula I had created to cope and with my childhood and youth that I then carried into parenthood. So I couldn't really hold other people responsible because it was all I created stories to land to me. So I still was carrying that, I believe. So when I met Bert, uh, and you know, heard the words from my daughter, you know, that she still loved me, and this forgiveness, right, was helpful.
You'd been waiting for that. That's what you'd waited 11 years to hear her say, right?
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. And
Ama-
it was so real. People say, well, maybe, was it, how do you know? But he knew a lot of things, as psychics do. They know a lot. They see a lot. They see into this invisible realm, and they share what they see and the messages and metaphors that for the purpose of guidance and healing.
Yeah, yeah. I just want to read a little extract from your book, if you don't mind. It's very, very, very short, but it is Bert talking to you, and I just loved it. I mean, it has warmed my heart and just made me feel alive. Paula, Alex wants you to know that she chose to die when she did. She was going to die the year before, but says that her brother was not prepared yet, so she decided to wait. Her life was difficult. Hearing that her life was difficult pierced my heart, but then how couldn't it have been? Bert went on. Alex wants you to remember that you both agreed to your lives being together in this way. She chose you as her parent, and you agreed. I felt honoured to have been chosen and realised that we were not victims, neither one of us. I mean, and then later you go on to say, I learned that each lifetime becomes a blueprint, one where we create. It goes, but I mean, for me, that is the very essence and the power of the story. And for anyone who is listening to this, read the whole book, because the whole book is full of incredible lessons for us all, even though it's told through your story. But I honestly, it melted my heart just hearing Alex becoming the parent to you, becoming your mentor, and telling you that you were the wizard in the Wizard of Oz, which at first you thought was really great, and then you had to think about it, and then the wizard is fake. Oh, right. Where do I go now? Will you just tell us a little bit about that? Because and when you heard that quote from Bert, how it made you feel.
Yes, 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 yes. No, the beauty of the whole scene that Bert showed, and that's the soul, the psyche communicates through metaphor. And the Wizard of Oz is an incredible, it is the hero's journey, right? Dorothy goes on, she gets her brain, she gets her courage, right? All of that. And so in the second time that I saw Bert, I drove up, I had this music. I remember it like, music blaring. I come in and he goes, oh, I heard it was a Gregorian chant, and I come in and I sit down and I was going to ask Bert about our cat, Sam. And because Sam suddenly left and Sam was another loss to us. And then I realized, oh, Alex took Sam with her, right? I kind of like, oh, what did happen to Sam? So when I asked the question, Bert was very quiet. And then I felt guilty, like I was tricking the psychic, And I said, no, I want to say that Sam's a cat. And he goes, well, I know, dear, like, but Sam is Toto in the basket. And Alex is Dorothy. and my son, had lost his heart. So he was, and someone else. So all the characters of the Wizard of Oz were there. And I felt like, wow, but where am I? And I was just going to ask Burton, and he says, and Alex wants to know that you are the wizard, that you're the wizard. And I was like, wow, and then so it was confusing, the whole metaphor at the very moment. Right. And then thinking through it, he was just a kind-hearted man, he and so where is that wizard, that externalization of that power outside of ourselves, right? So Dorothy was giving her power now to the wizard, right? But she had the red slippers the whole time, which is that power within, right? So that then became my journey to understand what that meant, to really think through the Wizard of Oz, watch the movie a ton of times. I saw the word Oz everywhere. It was amazing of the power of that message, and how we attract, what we're seeking to know, we attract. So even out running, I was an avid runner at the time, and I was out running on the sand. I lived on Miami Beach, and there was this Oz, and this big heart, and Oz in a Hispanic name, right? And so Oz loves, Mary or Maria, or what, but huge, like a 10-foot, thing dug into the sand. I mean, I watched a movie and about Marilyn Monroe, and at the end was the Wizard of Oz song. It was like everywhere I went. So what the meaning of that for me is that um that wizard outside of self is really within ourselves. Like when we come and we recognize, the and are able to connect up with our higher self, um however, spirit, God, higher self, there's so many different names, but we have this ability to channel that, to connect with, and find our own truth. And I was one who like sought all the time other people's truth, or easily influenced, needing that recognition. And so our strength, our inner power, comes to the greatest degree is when we feel safe and loved of self, and that compassion for self, and connected. So.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. Yeah, I mean, your journey was obviously it's meant to be, but yeah, one thing that really stood out as well was, as well as the grief, you did say that there was like almost negativity was hardwired into your brain, and I just wanted to touch on that a little bit because I mean I know you spoke to many people, did psychoanalysis, and went on a great journey meeting lots of different people, but you said at one point you had an inability to sustain even one single positive thought. How did you transcend that? How did you go from that, the lowest of the low state, feeling just, I don't know, just so down, to becoming a healer, almost becoming someone who transformed that negativity almost into your own rocket fuel to help other people?
It is one step at a time. There's no, you can't, you change your vibration. And so it's understanding perhaps our mental state, mental, emotional, soul state of soul and spirit, all of it is as a state. And that state of being has a vibration to it. And those feelings of guilt and shame and are very low vibrating, and they were with me. So the question becomes, how do you increase your vibration and transform into a higher and higher state? There's so many paths, right? I think people are right now figuring that out. Mine was through traditional cognitive therapy and then psychoanalysis, where that was very, very intense. Jungian psychology is a beautiful path to, to do that, to travel inward and understand self. But now there's so many tools available to us that can help us increase that vibration. I think the recognition that comes with mindfulness meditation, the Buddhist teachings, spiritual truths, is that we are not our mind. In Western psychology, we're so caught up, we don't recognize that our beliefs inform our thoughts, that create emotion, that impact our vibration. And so we need to go back to what are our core beliefs, what is getting in our way, and work through those. I learned the Psyche process. Dr. Rob Williams teaches it. I helped others through that, where you take a look at your own negative belief forms and you do a right brain, left brain integration process and change them. Through meditation, I was slowed down my mind enough to be able to hit a pause button when I went into worry and fret. Through the shamanic practice and training that I did with the four winds, was extremely powerful in that. And I read Alberto Villoldo's book. My first book of his was Courageous Dreaming, or Dream the World into Being, right? The Courageous Dreamer. And realizing that we co-create all the time with this love, universal source energy. And our thoughts are very powerful. And I combined it with then joining the Unity Church. It was Unity on the Bay in Miami. And that's founded on the power of prayer. Unity it's global, Christian church, but very metaphysical power of prayer. So I began to really recognize that all of our thoughts are like prayer. What is prayer? It's the fact that our consciousness, which is our thought forms, live outside of ourselves. And then I dug into all of Larry Doty's work. He's a beautiful writer about the power of prayer, is one of his books. Era 3 medicine, where we're living it. The Era 3 is mind, body, spirit. We figured out the body hundreds or so years ago. And then we figured out that what happens to the body and the mind, they're interconnected. And now we're in this Era 3. So we're, the power that we have through intention and thought to change what's going on inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. So I would say those three things gave me the teachings of it. And then it's the hard practice, right? You have to stay with it. And the different practices that I then fell in love with doing helped sustain that. You first cognitively understood it, and then I went on to integrate the practices to create the shift.
Yeah, wow. Some great advice there. Lots of different ways. I mean, obviously you went down the path with the four winds, and you did the shamanic training, energy healing. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what aspects of that really helped you to deal with the grief and to move on from being a victim to being a healer?
With Alex's death, what I missed and longed for was to again feel that fire in my belly, to have purpose and meaning in life and to help others. My whole role with disability immediately changed, and that connection with other families was just too painful. I did at the time, I was working at the University of Miami. I was faculty position, and I brought in all that knowing for pediatric residents. And I did find purpose and meaning there, but academia is very dry. There's a dry aspect of academia. And I my soul was seeking more, right? So there I was in the Four Winds Society. And I saw it as a way to help others, to heal, to I had already learned the Akashic records, and I began to study and learn that we could access our own life book and to help others access information. Loved ones of others would come through me, and I was beginning to help a lot of people. So I saw the Four Winds as augmenting that, and it did, and so it gave me that purpose and drive back to help others. It's um, yeah, and it was magical. It really was a magical. It was like everybody was there waiting for me. you know my first time, and I write about everything I'm talking about, I write about in my book. But the first time that we taught how to open the chakras and do an illumination. So I was laying on the massage table, and we work in dyad. So the other person was, we help each other. I said, I'll lay down first. And so unbeknownst to the person who was clearing my chakras, I felt this animal. I felt something in my belly, in my lower abdomen. And I was like, and I didn't say anything, right? And he's clearing and is rattling and clearing the chakras and doing everything he needed to do. And then upcoming was these paws. And I thought first it was a monkey because I saw black, I could see the black hair idea, right? Black fur. And then I realized when I saw the paws and they were coming up around my neck, it was a Black Panther. And it was just like a welcoming, beautiful experience. And she just laid there.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, there's something more to this than I thought, right?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people think it's all almost a metaphor. The jaguar, the Black Panther for death and fearlessness, but actually, yeah, I mean the ancient ones, it was normal for them to be in touch with their power animals or spirit animals, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes. And then now they come to the people I work with, right? And they often, particularly people who really resonate with the work, I feel like they show up, and as a teaching that
Yeah.
this is a strong connection for them.
How
So
was
that
it
was
for how was it for the guy who was healing you? Sorry to interrupt you. The guy who was doing the healing, and suddenly a Black Panther appears in front of him. That must have been pretty freaky.
well, he didn't. Interestingly, he didn't notice, right?
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't notice the
He was
experience.
so immersed in the healing and the illumination, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's the beginning. I think um, you know, the processes that we learned and then begin to apply, of understanding the chakras, the energy field, the co-creative force that we have, um, receiving, our ability, opening up our hearts, the ability to receive that illuminated energy, a force in a group, right? Because it's different, right? That's where I think you begin to be able to see. I could see right away. I mean, I came in a little bit open because I was doing Akashic record readers, but I thought that the gift of seeing into people's fields and what was there and sensing was due to the fact that the energy of the room, the energy with instructors that had long been in the work and so forth, magnified the experience.
Yeah, I mean
And
they
then
call it sacred space, don't they? Where
yeah,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes. And the archetypes and connecting with the four directions. And really for me, the connection with Mother Earth has been the most uh, fortuitous. It's
yeah,
the most powerful. I didn't have that mirroring of a positive mother. And so I was always looking for that outside of myself. And falling in love with Mother Earth what it became the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they say that, don't they? I mean, I've been studying a lot of this as well, and they say that when the rites of passage, essentially, to the Native Americans, were moving you from having your human mother and father to transcending that to Father Sky, Mother Earth, or Pachamama. You know, there suddenly you see the bigger picture, and these become your kind of celestial parents almost.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, it's the wedding, right? Like Rumi talks about the wedding night. You know, the
Yeah,
marriage, the wedding night is with spirit.
yeah, and yeah, I feel that that connection, not amongst the people who probably did your courses, but a lot of people in the West have almost lost that connection, haven't they? And I just get the feeling as well right now, you know, we're obviously in a period of transition. You know, astrologically, they're talking about us moving into the Aquarian age. But I mean, I feel almost like the old religions. I mean, no disrespect to them at all, because they serve a great purpose, and it doesn't mean that Jesus Christ doesn't exist. Of course, he does. But these old religions are almost fading, or at least they're being. I want to use the right word here without, so I don't get offensive. But they're almost superseding, and it's becoming like the earth. And the sky have almost become the new religion. That we need to remember that connection with our planet and the Divine Mother, as they call it.
It's so true. As our soul, we're longing, we're longing for that. I moved from Miami. Again, those moves, what's drawing us forward, we don't even know sometimes. We take that action in faith that it is for whatever it is for. And we don't know at the time. But I'm here in rural upstate New York, and I'm across from a lake, and there's a good sized hill behind me. And I needed to ground myself further in and make that connection with the earth. It's that inseparability, when you realize that we are nature. We are nature. And I'm bringing that. I teach the medicine wheel now to children in the Lightwork Education and Wellness Center, and I'm learning as I'm teaching them. But to bring young children into this knowing that they're to connect with nature and the beauty of it. So we're on the water element, and I'm teaching is there enough water also, and the sacredness of water. We save water because we don't want to waste it, and whatever, all of that about drinkable, portable water, but also mostly because it's sacred. And then in presenting the information, it was like 71% of the earth is water, and so is our body. It's pretty much the same, right? And the chakras are inside of us, right? And I'm teaching them chakras and how to spin and pendulums, and but the chakras are also the rainbows. So this idea of teaching children to connect with nature because that's who they are. And so when we come to fall in love with Mother Earth and care for her, we also will be caring for ourselves. And we care for ourselves, we're going to be caring for Mother Earth. And right now we're not caring for either one of them, right? The world's in crises. So many people have gotten lost from separate from that. So I do feel, because we're moving to this era of the divine feminine, the feminine force becoming, it's a beautiful expression that we one wing is male and the other wing of this divine bird is female, but the female wing is somewhat hampered, right? It's not fully open. And so humanity rises when both of those wings are fully open, and we can take flight. So we need to, that the value in connecting with the earth energy and the sun and the animals, plant, all of it, all relations, I believe comes in this time of where humanity is in this transition of an awakening
Yeah.
of the planet. Which I know you know.
I'm remembering. I'm trying to remember, Paula. Oh wow, that's such wisdom. Thank you for your openness and your softness as well. It's beautiful, and I know you say in your book that you felt that fairy tales were something, that the life we were told as youngsters that life is a fairy tale, and then we get our heart broken, and you know, but it is. I mean, if you can look from a higher vantage point, from that kind of eagle perspective, there is still a fairy tale even amid the crises and the challenges, and the earth is right now going through a tough time, and the people are going through a tough time, and people are struggling to understand. But if you look through the eyes of that eagle, it's still okay, isn't it? It's still okay, and it's so amazing that you're teaching the medicine wheel to young children. I'd love to send my children to your classes.
Well, we're doing actually a virtual mind shop. So that's virtual. So for anyone anywhere, except it's Eastern time, right? But 4 p.m. Eastern time, we start another round for teens, and they're loving it. You
Wow.
know, they're loving it. Yeah,
Yeah.
for mindfulness.
I,
And,
I,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you this because you're a teacher now, teaching the lessons that you've learned to people, I imagine, who are going through tough times now. And I wondered what advice that you would give for anyone who has lost someone they love close to them, or lost a child. What advice would you give for them? How can they? I know it's not an easy. There's no one quick win at all. But what advice would you give them to help them deal with this?
Um, there's good research that shows, Peter, that this connection with loved one, deceased loved one, gives so much um, a sense of peace, not only at the moment, but sustained. And so if one could be open to that experience, then it will happen. On the other side, our loved ones are like clamoring to communicate, and we can't experience it because it's not within our belief system. So if we open up our belief system to this as being a possibility, then it will happen. 30% of Americans have some type of afterlife, uh, after death experience with their loved ones, right? But it can be also a very profound one. And there can be people who connect you and can assist you with that. I've had many clients that come, and your work that takes people into this relaxed, altered state in which they can receive that beauty and feel touched by their loved one. It's so real. So I would say, number one, be open to that experience, because you will find great peace at heart. And that hope and courage it's intertwined together. And when in those darkest hours, and we say hours, but they can be months, and they can feel even years, where that darkness is there, that hope is alive. And it may feel a small flicker of hope, but we can put intention to expand that. Just see that flicker of flame, that kundalini energy, that life force energy within ourselves. It is hope, it is courage, and they go together. We have the courage to hope, and then we hope, and we take action, and we gain some strength, and we have more courage, and we have more hope. And along that way, for me, I think for many, along comes faith. And faith then is the opening of the lotus flower.
Yeah.
Um, so
Wow. Wow. Amazing.
and
Amazing.
it is the question I will add is, what is that we're hoping for? And for me, I believe unconscious was this hope of finding again this meaning and purpose in life, or come back to full vibrancy. And
Oh,
much of the traditional um, literature and what people tell you, particularly with loss of a child, is that things will never be the same. But they always say it with a dark, gloomy voice, right? Like, and you're like, who would do that? Why do people do that? And yes, they are never the same, but they can be better. They
wow.
absolutely can be better. So it's keeping that flame alive with hope, with courage, and then have the faith that there is a greater power, and there's so many people working on our behalf. Always.
Aho. Thank you so much
Uh,
for your courage. And also, there's an old saying in England, it's the hope that kills you, but what you just said is it's the hope that gives you the courage and opens the door to a greater life, and almost transcending the pain. Wow.
yeah.
Well, what an honor. Just in case anyone would like to get in touch, would like to buy your book, where can they buy your book? Where can they send their children to the medicine wheel?
I know. Yes. Yes. We have the school actually is a holistic school. So we have a full program, educational program that's, certified and so forth. And so we have that. It's Light Work Education, the Light Work Education Center. And then we have the afternoon program that's available virtually for everyone as well. And that's called Mind Shop. My website gives both, paulapetry.com, and my book is there, but it's also available through Amazon. I also teach the medicine wheel for adults. Just feeling that strong connection with Earth is, as you said, Peter, is our way forward, and we're
Yeah,
helping people make that connection.
yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you for opening the door to the Emerald City for us, and for taking us down the yellow brick road on a slightly different way to Dorothy. And thank you for showing us the wizard inside you. It's been an absolute honor, Dr. Paula Petry. Thank you.
thank you so much, Peter, for all that you're doing. Beautiful work. Very good. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's not work. It's absolute joy. I promise.